Hi everyone and welcome back to Venus Pages. Today we're talking about the poem The Funeral by John Donne. Yes, I am planning on finishing this A-level series even though I have now officially completed my A-levels, yay! So without much further ado, let's go into the summary and then move on to the line-by-line analysis. The poem is titled The Funeral. Note the definitive article, the specific use of the. It's not just any funeral, it's the funeral. It's a particular specific funeral. Also, as you read the poem, you'll slowly start to realize that more than a poem about the funeral, whose funeral you'll find out in a second, it's a poem about preparations for a funeral just as much. This is a poem that once again feels more like a dramatic monologue. We go back to themes of a speaker who wants to get revenge, this persona of John Donne slighted by the unrequited love of a woman, and so he has this desire to be martyred and buried with a lock of her hair. So this is really his own funeral for which he is preparing for, and the standard structure that we have here is three 8-line stanzas of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D rhyme scheme. The rhymes are never quite together, highlighting that just like they're separated and they're not in pairs like A, A, B, B, just so the speaker and the woman will never be together. We have seen this three stanza structure before in John Donne's poems. It's how he develops his central point, his central conceit, and each paragraph brings us some new idea about the hair and some new information about it too. And we also have irregular syllable line lengths here, with the last line in each stanza running on almost as if he cannot stop himself talking and complaining about the woman who has scorned him so badly. The poem can be compared to Twickenham Garden because we once again have very much this persona of a slighted lover, and with that, let's dive into the analysis. Whoever comes to shroud me, do not harm, nor question much that subtle wreath of hair which crowns my arm. The mystery, the sign, you must not touch, for 'tis my outward soul, viceroy to that, which then to heaven being gone, will leave this to control, and keep these limbs her provinces from dissolution. Whoever comes to shroud me. Shroud is the process of wrapping someone in a cloth before burying them, so do not harm, and it's the imperative of don't harm. It highlights that his sole instruction is to just not touch that single sole lock of hair that has been left behind. It's not, as is often the case, please try to wrap my body gently, please try to prepare me for my ascent into the other world. No, it's just don't, whatever you do, don't hurt the one lock of hair that I have so carefully conserved and brought with me to my death. He wants to be buried with that lock of hair. It's that lock of hair that he wants to carry with him throughout his entire life. Not just his life here on earth, but his life elsewhere, whether that be in heaven or in hell. But the funny thing here, or rather eerie, is that we actually don't know if it's just a single lock of hair. That's what I've been saying. Oh, he has this single precious hair. No, in reality, he says that crown, that wreath, and these are peculiar adjectives to use here. It's not, as we would imagine, like a single strand of hair in a locket or in a ring, as would have been usual at the time to keep your lover close by. No, it's a whole wreath of hair. So it suggests that there's quite a lot of hair. Also, while the wreath is like something that you could associate with a funeral, a crown is more about the power dynamics. The fact that it crowns his arm, she envelops him, she's in control, she's very much the queen, and he obeys her. He's like the slave. It's almost like a manacle of hair where she ties him to her even in death. It's a permanent symbol of love that he wants to take with him to the grave, but subtle wreath is also an oxymoron because you can't exactly have a subtle wreath. It's not something small, it's something big, something massive. It's again that prominent display of in control and the mystery, the sign you must not touch. So again, we have this done idea of love as a mystery, an attempt to achieve a special kind of love that's beyond the understanding of normal people. It's that idea of soulmates that we have talked about. Those what happens when you have soulmates who complete each other so strongly that they almost transcend the power of normal love, that they're almost something else entirely, that separated they're weak but together they're all powerful. And for 'tis my outward soul, it is my outward soul because my actual soul will go to heaven. That idea of him as soulmates, and because he's got her hair, she's buried with him. A part of her is buried with him. Because they're actually soulmates, even if she doesn't want to admit it, then that part of her will complement mine, or at the very least it will keep her bound to him and him bound to her. Viceroy is a deputy, so viceroy to the soul which had gone to heaven. It will leave this to control, so it's like her soul will control him even in death. She's the ruler who will keep his limbs, her provinces, from dissolution. So his body would decay, but because like he has this other soul, their souls will become stronger, so their mortal body will transcend these poor mortal precautions. And her provinces, it's almost as if she's the head and the limbs and his body are under her control, because they're two parts of the same soul. So this idea that like because they're soulmates they can control, like they're one body so they can control each other, and so she's the head and he's the limbs. For if the sinewy thread my brain lets fall through every part can tie those parts and make me one of all, those hairs which upward grew and strengths and art have from a better brain can better do it, except she meant that I by this should know my pain, and prisoners then are manacled when they're condemned to die. For if the sinewy thread my brain lets fall, so the synapses of my brain, look at the genius of that connection, to go from hair and to imagine it like the connections of a brain. I mean, during John Donne's time, you wouldn't have had such an understanding of nerves and synapses and connections and transmissions as we do today, and yet he makes that leap. He connects it in the imagery that we have. So, though every part can tie, so if the nerve connection connect my brain and body, then likewise my soul connects everything from me and my soul. It makes one of us all. So it connects her, it connects him, it connects their very soul, that one single hair, just like the brain connects the body. But not only is it a comparison, but in fact the hairs which grew upward are of better strength and form, so they're from a better brain, so her brain is almost like the better connection. Except, however, this is not what we think it is. It's not some romantic connection like, oh look, she makes me better, her hair complements my soul more than a brain complements a body. No, because she meant that I by this should know my pain. So we have thought that the hair is keeping him from pain, keeping him whole, keeping his mortal body from decaying, whereas in fact she did it to him so that he can know hurt, be manacled. So he's in handcuffs like prisoners. So it goes back to what I said earlier, how it's almost like a handcuff around his arm. It's not in a locket. Her hair is deliberately wound around his arm so that he can feel pain. Her purpose is to hurt him. So the hair isn't a crown or a wreath anymore like in the first stanza. It's specifically chains and manacles. We have a shift of ideas here. The themes change from the first paragraph to the second. And notice also that we don't really have any detailed explanations and descriptions of the woman. She's very impersonal. It's just a set of instructions that John Donne or his persona has left for the person who's going to shroud him. That notice how this cruel woman, whom I won't name, has like, you know, wound me out with this hair. But also notice this, that he hasn't asked for it to be destroyed. Is it because he doesn't know if it can be? Is it because he's worried of the consequences? Or is it because he's into this toxic abusive relationship? I think it's the latter, because in fact a lot of this is about unrequited love, and he's willing to be martyred, he's willing to suffer for her. So that's why he doesn't want it to be destroyed. And I also think it's quite philosophical, this shift of ideas from the first paragraph to the second paragraph, where not only do it's like how we begin a relationship sometimes, unfortunately, where we think that this person is like the ideal person, the right person for us. It's the person holding us up, making us stronger. Oh, this is the person to stop my mortal body from decaying, right? Like, this is the person who will make me live forever, who makes me feel alive. And then you actually realize that no, this is not the right person for me. And that's exactly the shift that Donne is showing us here. Whatever she meant by it, bury it with me. For since I am love's martyr, it might breed idolatry if into other hands these relics came, as 'twas humility to afford to it all that a soul can do. So 'tis some bravery that since you would have none of me, I bury some of you. So whatever she meant by it, whatever she meant, whether to hurt or to imprison me, bury it with me, because I am love's martyr. So again, he wants to be buried with it. He actively chooses this relationship no matter how toxic. It might breed idolatry. It's now my object of worship, and because I am a martyr to love, if people discover these objects, they might start to treat us like idols and to collect these things and to worship these things, and he doesn't want that. He wants himself to be the only person who can worship her. So he asked for these objects to be buried with him, and for it to not start a whole generation of people who want to worship her. She's only his. And he also doesn't wish this fate onto others because he knows how cruel this woman is. So in other words, he has died for love. It's this religious symbol, this hair that he worships, and so she's like the goddess, she's like his idol, she's like the one that he worships, and so is her hair. It's every remnant of her. And also, if into other hands the relic came, as was humility to afford to it all, that a soul can do so to some bravery. Humility here is a lack of a sense of self, so by coming into other hands, it's actually the opposite of arrogance. It's giving yourself in completely to her, and it is some bravery, it is some courage. It takes that spirit, that passion, in order to be buried with her, to be buried with her hair. And because you have none of that courage, I shall do it for you. I bury some of you. So in fact, this is also his letter to the woman, that one final bit of scorn, insofar as it was, this poem was just like, oh, you control me, but yet I'm a martyr to you. This part, we have that little hint of fighting back, that I am going to bury some of you with me. Even if you don't want me to take you, even if you don't want to be with me, I'm taking you anyway. And from this line, the poem takes this one final shift of conceit. Notice how in the first paragraph it's like, she's my queen, in the second paragraph it's like, she's the person who's making me a prisoner, and in the third paragraph it's almost as if, no, I will get my revenge too, because I will take some of you with me and you won't be able to rid yourself of me. So in that final stanza, he turns from a loving lover into a bitter and vengeful one. And isn't it almost significant that that's how the line ends? That's how this poem titled The Funeral ends, and it's almost like, what comes next? And we don't know, because presumably he's been buried. We have this complete carrying out of ideas here. So John Donne, as always, has masterfully presented us with a conceit from start to finish. So I hope you enjoyed this poem as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you next week.